I'm here at the 2023 Rock Chalk Olympics with Jim Harmer from Backfire. We're going to talk about what Jim feels like makes a good rifle. Gavin Gee here from UltimateReloader.com. Thank you so much, Jim, for coming out.
Heck yeah, good to see you again, man.
This has been good times, man. We've been shooting together. We've been listening to world-class competitors talk about what it takes to read wind in Mirage, do speed pistol stuff.
Yeah, let me tell you, this was a bit of a setup. This was a little bit of a setup. Because first you say, hey, I'm doing this cool event. Do you want to come? I'm like, of course I want to come. That sounds great. And then I get this invite in the mail, and it says, competitor, and I see who the list is that I'm competing. I'm like, what kind of joke is this? They were world-class shooters, awesome to learn from.
Yeah, you know, and what worked out really great about that was the cross-section of people here.
Yeah.
You know, if it was all just competitors, everybody would just be watching, you know, for competitive advantage the whole time and gaming stuff, which we saw plenty of, right? But instead, I felt like, you know, we engineered that hunting stage, and we wanted to give people a little bit of a different experience kind of going through things. And it really, each of you competitors really shined at different moments, which was really rewarding for me, you know, putting those stages together and seeing you guys learn and excel and all that. But, okay, in this video, what I wanted to pick your brain about, you cover a ton of rifle stuff, right? Like we kind of like a lot of the same things, but we cover it in a different way. What I wanted to ask you about was, what do you feel like makes a good bolt action rifle?
Well, you know, most people when they're looking at a good rifle, the very first thing that they're concerned with is the accuracy. That's what everybody wants to know, and it's the hardest question to answer when you're at a gun store and you look at, you know, 100 guns on the racks and you're like, how are you supposed to know what's the most accurate? And you can't return a gun. And so that's what most people are concerned with. And, you know, there's part of that, so we got to talk about that.
Sure.
But the thing that I would look at very first that you sometimes can find out in the gun store is, does it feed? Because for hunting, I have seen more animals missed because of poor feeding than anything else by far. Because, you know, you're walking around, you know, potentially for days. Most people don't have one in the chamber. You got it in the mag, you know, and you're going to rack your bolt when you have the moment. I don't know how many times I've seen we get to that moment, you know, deer's walking over the hill, whatever, and we can't feed the dang thing. And so it has to feed 100% or it doesn't go hunting with me. It happens all the time. Similarly, you make one shot and you want to make a follow-up shot. I mean, it's great if you can make one shot and it just drops, but a lot of times I'm putting a second shot in. Not because the first shot was bad, but because I'm going to shoot until they fall down every time. Anyway, so it's got to feed, and a couple things that you might check is if you're in a hunting store and you're gonna, you know, they don't want people messing with the guns a lot if you're just a tinkerer, but if they can sense that you're gonna buy
live rounds one by one and just run through a few mags, answer is no. But
a lot of times they'll have dummy rounds for you, and if you're serious about it, they may let you, you know, run a couple through there to see if it's going to feed. That's huge. But a couple things you might check are, one is, does it feed from the mag? Two, does it single feed, just, you know, not using the mag, just chucking in? And three, what happens if you're at a little bit of an angle? Often, if you're at a little bit of an angle, it doesn't feed anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so what about the cartridge? Because some cartridges are a little bit more demanding with feeding. I'm going to use the example of 6.5 PRC. You know, it stretches that short action to the absolute limit. Usually or always you need a notched feed ramp for the tip of that bullet to come up into feeding position. And so, you know, do you think about that? Do you think about, oh, well, you know, I know 30-06 is just going to feed great out of a long action, and that's going to influence my decision?
Well, some companies do just an awesome job of making sure each cartridge is purpose-built for each magazine and rifle. One that I'd give props to on this is Browning. Browning does a great job in the cartridges that they have, that they are really testing it, not just saying, it'll fit in that magazine and so we're good, you know? But they're actually testing it to make sure, and they'll often take the little followers, the little top portion of that magazine above the spring, and they'll make custom little followers there for each cartridge to make sure it feeds well. That's really, really big. Companies that do that. Some other companies, you know, they're just like, new cartridge fits in, they just go.
Right. Hope for the best kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the other things you're looking at in a good bolt action rifle? One that you would want to use and one that you'd want to own. Second
thing that I would look at is stock fitment, that
Okay.
it actually fits you. The gun industry moves slow. I think all of us would probably acknowledge that. There's a lot of tradition in guns and the way things move. And when you look at the stock lines of your traditional hunting rifle, it's really not very well suited to longer range shooting that a lot of people do.
Yep.
Even if you're not doing long range hunting, most people want to buy a rifle for multiple purposes now.
Yeah.
They want to go hunt, but they also want to take it out to the range and they want to go see what it can do, you know?
Yeah.
And so if you don't have a stock that fits you well, it's going to be really tough to shoot. So when I say that, cheek piece, and some rifles have a high enough cheek piece and you can get your optic low enough
Yep.
that you really don't need, you know, an adjustable.
Sure.
Like you can get a full cheek weld right on the gun, but that's really rare. Very rare that I'll see that. Almost every rifle you get out of the store, you'll get on it, see the optic, and you hover up before you can see it. Now the problem there is now we're not in a very good position to be shooting accurately. If we have things hovering and barely touching the gun, that's just not a solid spot, right?
It's kind of like not having a good rear bag position. And you've got a couple fingers in the way to lower your elevation. Yeah, that gets by in a pinch, but you know, you want to dial things in, right?
Of course. And then there's, you know, of course, the length of pole. You know, you and me are both about the same height, average guy height, whatever, 5'10".
Yep.
And for me, I don't really ever have to worry about length of pole. But if you're real tall, then, or you're, you know, using this with a youth hunting rifle, you know, having that adjustable length of pole so that their distance to the trigger is obviously nice to have.
Yeah.
But if you're average height, most people, it's not a huge game changer to be a 1/4 inch in or out, something like that. Then after, you know, so we talked about feeding and we talked about stock fitment. The next one that is huge for me is attachment points.
Okay.
I hate sling swivel studs.
Yes, I can agree
I hate
with that.
them.
Yeah.
So you think about it, it's this little piece of metal that sticks out of the, you know, the back and the front of the gun. And then we're using that as a pivot point on a bipod. Like, you couldn't design something more likely to be tilting on a bipod
Or
than,
to loosen.
Right. Or
Yeah.
you put it on a sandbag in the front, and now when you shoot, that sling stud rakes across that bipod.
Or your rear bag and your rear shooting bag.
And then you put a sling on, and now what does it do? It takes that bumpy part of the stock
Yep.
and it puts it against your back while you're hunting.
I know.
And so if I'm buying a gun that has sling swivel studs, they're gone immediately, and I'm gonna put in, you can get for a couple bucks, you can get little cutie flush cups and glue them in there on the side of the stock. Now you have a great place to attach a sling, and then put a little piece of Picatinny, or I really like the Arca system.
I'm Arca all over the place. Yeah.
So just a rail underneath. So you could do this to a cheap rifle that you get. It doesn't have to be expensive, but those are inexpensive pieces to put onto a rifle. And now you can put this on a tripod, you can put on a bipod, but you can move it up, down, wherever you need to get to the right height on uneven terrain when you're hunting, or just long range shooting. It just makes that standard rifle so much more likely to get in a stable position when you're shooting by having a good solid attachment point to it.
What I've actually really enjoyed, even on a hunting rifle, is a full-length Arca rail, so they can choose between a bipod up front and then clipping it into the tripod in the back. Because have you ever shot off a tripod with a sandbag and then moved over to a clip-in Arca, and it's just like, whoa, that is so much more stable.
So much better.
Yeah, and you've got tension adjustment, and you could just dial. Yeah, that is some really good stuff. Okay, so attachment points, I'm 100% with you there.
Yeah, and then we've got to talk accuracy.
Okay.
So my personal thought on accuracy is what everybody says across the industry is, hey, if it shoots 1 MOA, it's ready to go hunting. And, you know, I don't totally disagree. Certainly if you're shooting from a tree stand, a ground blind, whatever, you got a 100-yard shot, it's going to be fine. I mean, with 1 inch, you can pick which ventricle of the heart you're hitting, right? That's fine. But Western hunting, you know, you're out here, your property's amazing here. they're big canyons. If you see a bear, it's pretty unlikely that you could get down one valley and up the valley before that thing is gone.
It's so true, and you have the opportunity to engage from further distances. You know Guy Miner on our channel?
Yeah.
400-yard shot. That's pretty typical.
It
right?
really is.
You go to the East Coast in the dense brush or whatever, and they're thinking, I can't even drive to a shooting range to go to 400.
Right.
I got 100 or 200. And when they go hunting, you could just use buckshot.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so if that's the case, then, oh yeah, I totally agree. That's fine. But in hunting big country like this, I really like to see better than 1 MOA accuracy. Not that it's totally necessary, but the reason is, so let's say you have, whatever, a small deer, whatever, we'll call the lungs 10 inches, whatever. And so everybody says, well, my gun shoots 1 MOA, so in theory, I could shoot to 1,000 yards. That would be 10 inches, right?
Yeah. As long as the rifle doesn't move at all and there are no other factors, right?
That's right. The problem is, I'm gonna screw it up. I know I am. And so that just shrinks your margin of error.
Right.
You know, and so if the gun's more accurate, makes it okay for me to make a little bit bigger of a mistake and I'm still hitting everything. And so, plus it just the confidence it gives you when you're hunting with a gun that you just know is dialed. It's incredible. It does make a difference when you have absolute confidence. I'm not at all advocating taking unreasonable long shots. I don't think I've ever shot past 400 on game.
And you've been all over the world hunting game. So speaking of you screwing it up, me screwing it up, what about trigger pull? Because a lot of hunting rifles have really dang heavy triggers, you know? And when you're pulling and pulling and pulling, you know, it's easy to pull the rifle off of the target. So where do you like to see your trigger pull weight? Do you like to see single stage or dual stage? What is your thought on that? Okay,
I'm a little bit weird in this, but I love a 2-stage trigger. I mean, I'm sold on 2-stage because I like the trigger light. For me, for a hunting rifle, I'm just barely under 2 pounds. I feel like I can still shoot that really well, and I'm still very safe if I'm trembly or whatever, something like that, right? But the 2-stage I like because sometimes, you know, that moment just lives on forever in your memory, and you shoot a deer or whatever, for weeks afterward, you're just thinking about that moment, right? It feels like it's over too quick with a single stage. It feels like it was, I didn't get the joy. And so I like that feeling of the take up and it's like, okay, we're doing this. And then bang, you feel that wall.
You know what I love about this discussion is I've talked about these same things with multiple other people and you're bringing up different points. Like you led with feeding, right? It's a good point, you know, when I sit here and think about it. I didn't do a lot of big game hunting, you know. Most of my shooting is kind of under controlled circumstances, but man, I've had misfeeds in a competition. And I'll tell you, that does not feel good.
Nope, so, totally messes you up.
You know, that's a good reminder. You know, some of these things are really super important. Okay, so did we miss anything of the core Jim Harmer rifle attributes?
Well, the only other thing I'd say is the chambering for hunting. And, you know, two things that I would say. One, the same that everybody would tell you, is you have to shoot it well. And especially if you're going to a super light rifle, it's really rare that I see a rifle that's very, very lightweight in a very heavy cartridge and it ends up well.
Completely agree. Both for the shooter and the experience and the anticipation, because you know what's coming. You sighted in the rifle, this is going to be abusive, you know, and then also just the sheer ratio of the energy dispensed to the weight of the rifle is too high. I call it a bunking bronco. I had a 300 Remington Ultra Mag, and it wasn't a heavy rifle, and I'm thinking, I got to do something different with this. I don't need this in my life. Sorry, 300 round fams.
Now, having said that, you know, I was recently on a hunt in Mexico, and a friend of mine, it was a steeply quartered away shot on an aoudad, but he, you know, it was like 200 yards, and he was a very good shooter. And says, I can slip this in between the ribs. We're going to be fine, right? You know? And he was right. That bullet went, I mean, exactly where he intended it to go. But just in the second that he was pulling the trigger, the aoudad takes one step, and it was, I mean, perfect in the sphincter. I mean, it was a perfect butt shot.
We had that happen at the Rock Chuck Olympics today with the 22 LR after the action.
There you go.
Jimmy the cameraman.
And because it was a 300 Win Mag, that aoudad went straight down.
Wow.
And so there is something to be said for shooting those heavier cartridges, but for me, if I want the rifle to also be lightweight, I know I got to leave the heavy stuff behind, the heavy cartridges behind.
I think that is really, really sound advice. Thank you, Jim, for walking us through that. Now, if you all want to know more about the stuff we've been talking about, I will point you directly to Backfire on YouTube and backfire.tv.
That's right. That's where I am.
Good stuff. Now, I know a lot of you watch Jim Harmer on Backfire, and maybe you have something to add to this conversation. Drop a comment and we'll start a discussion. That concludes this video, and that means
it's time to wrap it up.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, we're on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, where we've got unrestricted content, and Instagram. Make sure to follow us on all those channels. Ultimate Reloader also has a commercial solutions division serving law enforcement, the military, and the gun industry. We have some unique capabilities, including a comprehensive suite of recoil testing and evaluation capabilities, trigger profiling, and more. If you're interested in custom rifles like what we build here on the channel or gunsmithing services, you're going to want to go to rifles.ultimatereloader.com and get on the wait list. If you want to learn lucrative gunsmithing like what I show here on the channel, including building custom rifles and Cerakote plus a whole bunch more, you're going to want to check out the Colorado School of Trades, schooloftrades.edu. Thanks again for watching.